Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk about something that's pretty much the reality of my life, and that's the dangers and the pitfalls of being incredibly focused and incredibly intense about one thing. I have wanted to be a professional musician since I was 4, basically, and while there's been some ups and downs and some changes in how I view my career and what my career is, and even how intense I am about it, it's something that I've been focused on for the past 22 years of my life. And that's led me here, and that's given me a lot of opportunities, and it's given me a lot of drive and passion, and is the reason I'm here today. But it's also something that can hurt me, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are in the similar boat where you're very, very passionate, very intense, very focused on this stuff. And sometimes that means that you don't necessarily see some of the things that you're doing to yourself and to your life. And I am trying to be better about it. I'm trying to be more reflective and more aware of my tendencies and of the downfalls of my tendencies and address them. But it's something that's really hard to recognize in yourself and something that I'm still working on, and I wanted to maybe talk about it a little bit to try to help. The first thing is kind of obvious, and that this intensity and this work ethic especially can lead to injury. I, especially now, have a tendency to not take days off. I've had to force myself to kind of go, no, you're exhausted, you're done, you need to take a time off. And last week's video kind of is a testament to that I am exhausted sometimes and I can't practice, and I need to recognize that in myself. Those of you who've been following me for a long time know that going into grad school, I was diagnosed with carpal tunnel, and that is a repetitive motion injury. It means that I was doing something wrong or too intensely, and while it was aided by the fact that I was typing at bad angles, I was also knitting, and there were a lot of things that were putting a lot of pressure on my wrists. It was also a sign of that I wasn't practicing properly. And it's not worth letting it get to that point to be something that you acknowledge. There are so many amazing musicians who get focal dystonia or tendonitis or carpal tunnel and aren't able to come back from it. And that's not worth it, especially if this is really your passion and what you want to do. And I've talked about this a lot with injury, like you really do need to listen to your body and be very careful. Don't play with pain. If you have pain, go see a doctor, talk to them about it, be open about it, don't lie about it, and very much address the problem and treat it how you're supposed to. Don't keep practicing through it if you've been told to rest, and wear your brace or whatever you have to. Like, don't take it as a sign of weakness that you have to stop for a little bit or pull back or adjust. Obviously, the more radical example of that in my life is my oral surgeries, but I didn't really take that example into the rest of my life until I was faced with this carpal tunnel issue, where I had to figure out how to work around it. And even now, with the 365 and now 52 weeks, I've kind of built this model where I don't have breaks built in, and it's something that I'm addressing, obviously. We've talked about that a lot, but it's something that I have to be more conscious of, and sometimes I have to take shorter days when I really just want to play for 3 or 4 hours. I have to go, no, you get like half an hour today, you're not at the point where you can. The next thing I want to talk about is letting your social life suffer. I think I've talked about this a little bit, but the past 2 years I've been very, very focused on music and very focused on starting my career, and that's not changing. But I've also realized that I didn't really have social connections or personal connections in the city I was living in. I had musical connections and people that I worked with for gigs, but I never really had friends that weren't already people I was friends with from earlier. And that meant that I wasn't going out on weekends. I was kind of just sitting in my apartment watching Netflix, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But it's not the only thing that I wanted. I'm an extroverted person. I love human interaction, and it's something that gives me energy. And so not having people to go do things with was draining. It was not allowing me to be my best self musically or personally. And that's a big thing. We're artists, and our art suffers when we suffer. And yes, there's all this romanticism of artists who were depressed and worked better when they were depressed, and that's what it is. But your mental health and your mental state and you being the happiest you can be is incredibly important. And while we all love music and maybe you feel like you play better when you're at a lower point, it's not worth it. You being happy and healthy is far, far better than being a world famous musician. It really just is. The last thing is being as focused and as intense as most of us are mean that you sometimes close yourself off to opportunities. And this is musical opportunities, not the stuff I was just talking about, but opportunities within our own field. I have realized that a gig is a gig, and as a freelancer, I kind of need to take what I can get, and if it's not exactly what I want, there's nothing wrong with that. And yeah, if I'm offered 2 opportunities and one of them is more what I want to do, then yeah, that's something that I weigh in the decision-making process. But if I don't have 2 opportunities and I'm given an opportunity, I don't really care what it is as long as it's like safe and legitimate and all that jazz. And I find that some people are very limiting in what they do. They want to be an orchestral musician, so they only take orchestra jobs, they only audition for orchestras, and they're not really seeing like all of the other opportunities around them. And then they're kind of miserable because they're not getting a lot of work, or they're not getting as much work as they might want to, or they can't make a living, or whatever it is. And it's not that they're not good players, it's not that they're not talented and won't make it eventually, but while we're all making it, it's a kind of beggars can't be choosers situation. If you're offered an opportunity and you can viably do it, it's worth looking into it. I have turned down some things, but it wasn't because they weren't what I wanted to do. It was because they were legitimately not opportunities that I wanted to be associated with. Because I do have a professional persona to maintain, and sometimes things aren't really what I want on my resume or want my name associated with, and that's a reason to turn things down. But I'm totally fine with the contemporary specialist that I am being associated with a wedding gig or an orchestra gig or whatever it is. If it's musical and it's legitimate and it's something that I'm being offered, who am I to turn that down? And it's really difficult to see that sometimes because a lot of us know that freelance careers really matter about who you know, but who you know doesn't necessarily have to be directly in your field. People talk and people recommend each other to other opportunities, so that one random wedding gig that you did with someone might lead to something that's more up your alley later because they worked with you and liked you. So seeing the bigger picture is difficult, but definitely worthwhile. I hope you guys learn something from this, or at least can acknowledge a little bit more of your tendencies. And as I said, I'm still working on this. There's still tons of things that I have my blinders on for, and I'm slowly starting to find those things, and that's part of the process of growing up and becoming a professional musician and becoming an adult, really. So if you guys like this video, give it a like. If you're new here, subscribe. If you want to support me more, check out my Patreon, and I'll see you guys on Thursday.